Okay, so to start off, I want to explain why I even had this idea in the first place. Seeing as Marathon is most likely going to be a slow-paced extraction shooter, whilst Apex is a fast-paced battle royale, some people might be a little confused as to why I would talk about what Marathon could take from Apex Legends. Surprisingly, it isn't actually the whole hero/class-based debacle that have been centering around leaks and job postings and things like that. I actually want to talk about what Marathon can learn from the map design in Apex Legends. I think the best way to illustrate it is the map Olympus. Olympus, in my opinion, already nails the look of being an artificial habitat, and this is something I anticipate Marathon exploring in its own maps, so this should make my point pretty visible. Now, Apex maps do a few things really well, in my opinion. The maps flow very naturally, and they separate points of interest very intelligently. It is a little bit harder for me to quickly demonstrate how the flow of map feels, so we'll come back to that. But what I can show off right now is how the map separates itself. Now, what I mean when I say that the map separates itself is that the map has these different types of barriers, whether it's this giant wall with the phase runner, these little walls or the ships, or like mountains, things like that. The maps in Apex do a very good job at separating themselves into zones. And what I would consider a zone is, I would say, like this area, so gardens and clinic, and the area to the walls would be a zone. I would say that you could make an argument for Grow Towers, Orbital Canyon, and this little patch here to be a zone, or that you could make it so that Grow Towers gets cut in half, so this half gets put in that zone, this half gets put in that zone. But another example would be with Hydroponics Elysium. This is one big zone here, but this one has a lot more open area. A really POI heavy zone would be like this, with Phase Driver, Bonsai, Solar Array, all of these, and this big zone here. It could also just be a single POI surrounded by some fields. But the way that these zones break themselves up really intelligently, in my opinion, is by having a numerous number of checkpoints breaking them up. So all of these little gaps in the walls and stuff here act as a choke point. But choke points, are kind of a death trap. So they give you different routes to take through it. Energy Depot is a good example of this. It's kind of like one big choke point, but there's 3 or 4 entrances based on how you look at it, and then there's some other unique ones you can use doing abilities or sneaking around and that stuff. So these separations do a really good job at cutting off parts of the map so that the intended experience is kept with those areas, whilst also not limiting the ability for players to maneuver around and be able to flank and rotate freely and that kind of thing. Okay, so back to my other point. The maps in Apex flow really smoothly, whether it's your first time playing a map or your 10,000th time. Map design is so intuitive that I rarely feel like I died because I didn't know about some angle that I got shot at from. I usually feel like I either got outplayed or surprised or something like that in a fair manner. The funnels of the maps means that players are naturally gravitated towards each other even when they are just moving between major locations or looking for loot. Because of that, fights usually break out in a specific zone instead of being completely random and across map, things like that. Long range fights are still a possibility, but because there are only so many completely open fields, players are encouraged to be in close to medium range instead. Fights are more dynamic and you can feel more impactful, usually in close quarters, because you can take advantage of everything at your disposal and see up close and personal how everything is affecting and be able to better gauge how fights are going. The other advantage to a map being designed to have a distinct flow is that the in-between is allowed to feel unique. Open fields get to feel distinct from choke points and named POIs. Even the large locations that are open and have long sight lines, the fighting can feel different in there than in fields and things like that. In other games, I often find the dead zones and in-betweens can feel largely samey. The dead zones in Warzone or Fortnite are pretty indiscernible based on location. If you showed me a couple screenshots of a random forest pathway in Hunt Showdown, I really wouldn't be able to tell you where it was from. They all just feel very similar. Even if people will say they're unique, they largely look and feel the same. You don't really have to change your strategy up based on if you're in between like mines and hunting cabins and things like that, or if you're in between like tilted towers and like the lake and stuff like that. But in Apex, the open areas near like Hammond Labs looks and feels very different from the areas around Solar Ray or Oasis. The open areas get to feel unique, and I feel that it contributes a lot to maps feeling good to play on, and really just being able to be controlled and have the developers be able to account for more things, so they're able to just design a better environment overall for players to fight in. And I really think that's the big takeaway here. Now, I really do want to finish off this just by kind of giving an in-game view as to what this can look like. So I chose Grow Towers because it's pretty similar to what we could see in Apex. It's just like farming, hydroponics, things like that. But what you can see is if you look to the north, you can see like the open fields are really downhill there, and it's blocked off by billboards and things like that. But the open areas just have like very little cover. When you look at the rest of the point of interest, there's more cover, there's buildings, there's things like that. And when you look south, there's another open area, but then instead of rocks, they have like different walls and tech and things like that. And in the background, you can even see like all the ships and the walls that are used to separate the major zones and things like that to increase the flow of the map. I really just think that all of these things combined, between the unique in-betweens, having the walls and lots of choke points to allow for maneuverability and also planning and things like that, really is something that Marathon should be looking into getting. And I really feel that would be a really important thing for Marathon to take a look at. Just make sure that the maps can flow really smoothly and that they don't feel jagged or jarring to move between sections. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time. Y'all have a good one, and I'll be in my rat cave if you need me.